Hey, everybody. Welcome to Called Up the Prospects podcast. I am Chris Peters of FloHockey, joined as always by Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects. And we are here in Texas. We were planning to do a nice, cool shoot for you guys, maybe do things at the same place. It's raining, so we couldn't do outside. That would have been an option. And there are games going on, so that's not an option. So we're in our own hotel rooms doing this. So maybe not the prettiest backdrop. If you're listening, it doesn't even matter to you. So use the theater of the mind and use the most nondescript looking hotel rooms that you can imagine. And you have painted the picture. But anyway, Cam, how the heck are you? Great to have you with us once again, and great to be in Texas for this Under 18 World Championship.
Yeah, it's not super hot. Waiting for that Texas heat to kick in, maybe get a swim in or something over the next couple weeks. But at the rink yesterday, good to see you. Good to see everybody in person again, and start watching some hockey and see some of these kids. It's been a while since I've seen some of them live, so it's been exciting and looking forward to Canada later today.
Yeah, it definitely feels like here's a great opportunity to catch up on the players that maybe we haven't seen as much in the last couple of months, or you can't see everybody every weekend, right? So it's very fun to get that. We are going to talk about the Under 18 World Championship today. We're also going to talk about the Calder Cup playoffs, which is absolutely stacked with NHL prospects, young guys under the age of 22 that are going to make an impact in the NHL eventually. You can obviously watch those on FloHockey, but we're going to talk about the Calder Cup playoffs, a little bit of a prospect grab bag as well. We're going to talk Tom Willander, and I know I always pronounce it the way that I write it. So we'll let Cam do the correct pronunciation when we get to that segment. But anyway, we'll also talk about that, and the NCAA CHL recruiting race is really going to heat up here in the next couple of weeks. But before we get to all of that, I want to remind you that we are brought to you by wonderful pistachios. Pistachios are known for their protein, power, fiber, and better for you unsaturated fats for a combination that may help keep you feeling fuller longer. And that is from our friends at Wonderful Pistachios. And Cam, we're in Texas, Frisco and Allen. You got Frisco is at the Comerica Arena. It's the Dallas Stars practice facility. The Allen over in Allen, they're playing where the Allen Americans and the ECHL play. And you've got 10 national teams playing basically the mini World Juniors. A lot of people, it's the same exact format. It is a tremendous place to get a preview of the future of the NHL. It's one of the most highly scouted events. According to the IIHF, around 200 passes have been issued to NHL personnel for this event. And then you add in the fact that there's college recruiters, there's junior hockey GMs and scouts here. We're talking, upwards of 300, 350 people here just as talent evaluators at this event. It got started yesterday as we record this. We record on Thursday. It started on Wednesday. And it's been a really interesting event so far. Sweden, we knew, was going to be very good. Canada hasn't played yet. USA struggled a bit with Czechia, ended up beating them. But I want to start with Sweden because that, to me, even coming into the tournament, I felt as I look at that roster, whether they have Anton Frundell or not, they currently don't have him, but they may get him later. That still looks like the favorites to me, and they go out and score 10 goals in their first game against Switzerland. Any thoughts and takeaways from this just remarkable showing from Sweden to start this tournament?
Yeah, like you said, anybody who's anybody in the NHL circles is here right now, and that makes up about 90% of all the people in the buildings. So this is a friends and family kind of tournament for the most part for the players. But yes, it is, GMs, AGMs, head scouts, director of amateur scouting, everybody's here. So that's always great for us too. And a huge opportunity for these kids, this year's draft class and the 2026 class. So, looking at that team, Sweden is like, the top two players that everybody's kind of really interested in is Ivar Stenberg and Viggo Bjork, who are the 2026 kids. But Sasha Boumediene, dropped a huge monster performance. That's the best I've seen from him, for sure live. Maybe the best I've seen from him in totality. Great four-way mobility, was really activating, jumping into the rush, pinching down the wall, lots of fakes, cross slot dishes. one-time attempts. Like he was all over the place. And defensively, he stood up. He didn't have that many challenges against, but he had a quick stick, and then that skating really allows him to clean up any mistakes or cover any ground. So I really liked what I saw from him. Philip Ekberg dropped the 4 goals, the Rooster. He's feeling good getting out of that 67s tight structure that they have there in the OHL. And then, yeah, like it was all around a dominant performance. I think they outshot them. They nearly put up 60 shots on goal too. So a great start for Sweden without Frundell, as you mentioned. And on paper they might be the front runners, but I still think Canada's got a good crack at defending their title at this one.
Yeah, and we'll get to Canada in just a second. They just finalized or mostly finalized their roster. They haven't registered all the players that they named to the team yet, but we will talk about them in a little bit here because they absolutely have an opportunity. A lot of 2006 draft eligibles on that team as well. Getting back to Boumediene as well, 6 points. So they started first, he had 5 points. Then they knocked him down to 4 points. As of today, he has been credited with 6 points in the 10-3 win over 10-2, 10-3. It all runs together now. It was a lot of goals to not as many. 6 points in the game. That is one off the record. The record is co-held by Tony Rahala, who was one of my favorite players in this event back in
That's a deep cut.
2009 and 10, playing with Michael Granlund, unbelievable duo in this tournament, and Jack Hughes. They had 7 points in a game. Many other players have had 6. So Boumediene is now, co-leads for most by a defenseman in the history of this tournament. And it doesn't matter who you play. Putting up 6 points from the blue line is a big deal. He did score a beautiful goal. He's got a tremendous shot, which we didn't see a lot at BU. Time and space was not his friend in college hockey, the strength of players in college hockey. But this was an opportunity to play with a little bit of extra time, a little bit of extra space, being a little bit physically more developed than some of his peers. He played in the USHL last year at 16, goes to college, plays there at 17. And now we're talking about a guy that is very much in consideration for the first round. The skating ability, as you mentioned, is high end. It's a separating factor for him. Now he's going to have to show, I think, that he can impose his will a little bit in some of these games because you couldn't do that in college. So what are the other tools in your toolkit here? I think the puck explodes off his stick, whether he's passing or shooting. Everything is pretty quick in that regard. The questions that have come up about him, and I think that this will be an opportunity for him to put those, quiet them a little bit, is I've heard some people say, I don't love the pace of decision making from him. I don't, I worry that he doesn't think it quickly enough, he can be a little indecisive. I think we saw that at college hockey, but I also think that was part of the adjustment. But still, 6 points in his opening game here. He's going to play a ton of minutes for this Swedish team. They did not have him at the February 5 Nations event. Now they do. I think he makes them better. And he's one of the reasons why I do feel like they could be the favorite here. They have so much firepower up front, but if you have a good mobile back end, which he is really the anchor of, I don't know that they necessarily have the depth defensively as past Swedish teams, but having a guy at the top like him is going to make a difference. So really, really tremendous performance. You did mention Stenberg and Bjork, and we're going to talk about them a lot in this show because I think that people are going to want to know those names for a long time here. But those two guys, I thought, Stenberg was a little quiet at the beginning of the game. I think Bjork showed flashes. Ultimately, they got involved offensively. But in terms of, hyping these guys up, we've talked about Stenberg several times on this podcast. We haven't talked about Bjork as much. But based on what we're seeing, I mean, these two guys look like absolutely the real deal, guys that are going to be top tier picks next year. I mean, what are the things that you've seen so far that you like about these two guys?
I mean, Bjork is, like you said, the flashes are like super, super high end with him. Great handles, great IQ, a little physically, not mature yet, underdeveloped, I would say. And so we see that, same thing at the Holinka. Super, super young at the Holinka in the summer there too. But when he steps up in this international competition, he can get knocked down easily, and teams will kind of key in on him a little bit, and he'll turn into pressure sometimes and get beat up. But great hands, great vision, great release. Like he set the record in the J20 this year for points all time as a 16-year-old. That's an under
Yeah,
20 league,
not
and he set the
yeah,
record. Like,
no
like
no
this
age
is
no age qualifier, just the record. Just
no,
the record.
right? And that
Yeah.
was as a rookie, right? He was playing J18 the year before that, and for half the season he was playing in like the below lower end tier of the J18. So it's a pretty incredible step up for him. So I really love that player. I do think that he's super super young for the 26 class too. That,
Yeah.
I asked him yesterday. I was like, you and Ivar are both kind of gunning for top five spots next year. Is there any like friendly competition between the two of you on who might go first? And he laughed. He's like, well, everything's a competition. And first of all, I loved that. But he did kind of defer to Ivar, who is nearly a full year older, right? That he's like, he's kind of been around the block a little bit, played this, half the season in the SHL already. So he's given the nod. But when NHL teams are assessing, they're going to look at that too and be like, this kid still has an extra like 10 months of development ahead of him that someone like Stenberg already has had put in. So yeah, I think Bjork is a really potentially a special player. Stenberg's got that like hard skill. And like you
Yeah.
said, he was a little quiet to start, and then as the points or the goals were running up for Sweden, you could see he wanted to get involved in it. So he had the nice goal off the rush, and then he was just blasting away one timers on the power play. You could see he wanted to get more. He wanted to get more, and so he has that kind of internal fire in him too. And he's got a little jam to his game, but I do like how he pushes into the middle of the ice, pushes towards the net front. We didn't see it so much yesterday, but I think we will as the tournament wears on. That chemistry that he has on that top line, they've played together a ton too. So that's a real dangerous threat, that top line. And then to have a kid like Bjork and Yves Wozniak and Eric Nilsson kind of down your lineup too, that are going to be able to contribute in different ways too. That's what makes Sweden so dangerous this year.
Yeah, I think there's tremendous depth there, and seeing what they've brought, and they've got guys like Milton Gastrin as their captain, and he's a heavy presence down low. He's able to make plays near the net. You mentioned East Wozniak, who he had a great that one timer goal yesterday, and just brings a little bit more to the table in terms of experience. He was on this team last year at this event as well. I think there's also some decent size in terms of what they have. East Wozniak is listed at 6'3", Gastrin 6'1", but heavy. Eddie Genborg, he looked,
Mm-hmm.
he looked big yesterday. Out there,
Yeah,
these
he likes to
U18
hit.
guys. Yeah, those are the things that stand out, and so I think there's going to be a lot of intrigue about this team. We'll see kind of how the goaltending ultimately holds up. Luv Herenstam has been one of the guys that has been in this tournament before. That's helpful. We'll see kind of ultimately what it all looks like, but there is so much to like about this Swedish team, and I was really excited to watch them. Even though Switzerland not the strongest opponent, I thought the Swiss for stretches of the game played well, gave them some trouble, but really to see the depth of that lineup show through. That's why I feel like they have a real chance to win it all here. Any closing thoughts on Sweden before we move on to the U.S. and Czechs and Canada here?
Yeah, I think we touched on it. I was really, really impressed with Nilsson though yesterday.
Yes.
Jamming his game, penalty killing, creating some offense too. He could be a player. That was the best viewing I've had on him too.
Yeah, that's a really good call out because I think that's a player that NHL scouts seem to like too. That
Mm-hmm.
they like that jam that he has. They like that there's a little bit of aggressiveness, and on top of that, he's got that scoring ability, and I think he showed some real skill as well with the finish that he had. So that's going to be really interesting to watch. But yeah, really intrigued by Sweden and what they're going to have here going forward. So let's take a look now at USA. They were down 2-1 to Czechia in their first game on home ice. It was a tough game. And then Blake Fiddler, Cullen Potter scored, looked like he scored, challenge for offside, no goal. It was unfortunate because it was an incredible display of skating
Oof.
and skill
Yeah.
from Cullen Potter. We're going to talk about him at length in a little bit as well. But Blake Fiddler, hometown kid, Vernon Fiddler's son, scores a game-tying goal, assists on the game-winning goal, scored by Will Horkoff. Great power move to the inside, and then just a quick shot through a defenseman's stick just inside the post. Really big-time play and a big-time moment. They do get an empty netter at the end. But yeah, I mean, I think that game was indicative of what we've seen from this U.S. team throughout the year, and this is with a lot of new players. There has never, I've been following this tournament a long time. There has never been this many outside players from outside of the NTDP that has played in a World Under 18 championship, and I think that's twofold. There have been injuries that knocked out notable players that would have been here, but they also had to make cuts, which happens every year, but not in this high a number. They also have a couple of underagers on the team, Mikey Birdchild, Casey Mutrin. So they're they had to kind of readjust this roster. After watching them, I do think that the additions they made are going to help. Fiddler in particular, Cullen Potter in particular, obviously Horkoff. So all of these outside additions did contribute. My question to you, Cam, is after watching them throughout the season, watching them in the first game, what is the likelihood of this team being able to truly compete for a gold medal at this event?
Well, I mean, they were, like you said, they were pretty close to losing that game. Potter was the best forward. Fiddler was the best defenseman. A couple of those airlifted guys in there. I think that they have enough skill, enough jam, enough kind of physicality, and if they can get the goaltending, they're the third best team at this tournament, right? Yeah. So if you're the third best team in this tournament, maybe your path gets cleared by some lucky bounces in the medal round, or maybe you show up and you get big goaltending and end up in a gold medal game too, right? So I don't think it's out of the question. I think there is a clear hierarchy here, though, and it's Canada and Sweden, and then it's USA, and then it's Czechia. Well, those two are pretty evenly matched, and then it's everybody else. Like, nobody else is really at the same level skill-wise here. Like, Finland is. This is such a down, probably a couple of years for Finland here that it's ugly, right? Like, we're sitting there. I'm trying to write reports on these guys at that Allen rink there early on. It's like, geez, like who am I even writing on right now? Like who's a legitimate draft eligible from this team? Few and far between. So yeah, I do think they have enough though that they could backdoor their way into a gold medal game. Not to say that they would win it, but they could get there. But otherwise, projected to be like, well, we'll probably see them in the bronze medal game anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I think their medal hopes are clear. I think that they have that capability. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think this is Finland is having a down year. USA, it's a down year for the birth year. There's going to be very few first round draft picks that are American this year. Obviously some of the guys that are the best players among Americans are late birth dates from the previous birth year. So it's not James Higgins and Logan Hensler. Those guys aren't part of this birth class. So, they're not here. So it's going to be interesting. One of the things watching the game against Czechia, I've watched a lot of the NTDP, a lot of U18 hockey, have seen that team so many times. And this one, you can see the ideas are good. The execution isn't there. And I just feel like there's just a missing link in terms of the skill. Like I think that there's hockey sense. I think that there's physical ability. They're not connecting at the same time. And so that's one of those things that I think NHL teams are going to look at, because what do the best players do? They connect those at the same time, and they do it consistently. We haven't seen that all year from this team. I do want to also call out LJ Mooney, the little guy. He was named USA's Player of the Game. They're giving out silver boots, and as our friend Sean Shapiro noted, they are the same trophies that beer league champions get at the Comerica Center, because it is also a community rink on top of being a decently sized stadium. So yes, very cool. But LJ Mooney, he's one of those guys. I got a lot of questions about him on Twitter, so I wanted to bring him up, Cam, because he's a bit of a tough one. How can you not love him? The compete, the speed, the skill, does all those things. He was in the 200s on the Central Scouting rankings. You talk to NHL teams, there are probably going to be a number of teams that don't list him because of the size. Does he, you think about the guys that make it at that size, and he's, listed at 5'7", maybe, and he's fairly light. Yeah, generously. And he's a little light. And you look throughout history, the guys that are under 5'8", There are fewer and far between. They don't have super long careers. Theo Fleury played 1,000 games in the league, but there aren't a ton of guys that you can point to. And some of those guys, what do? They built up their bodies. They, found ways to make things work. Do you think there's an NHL future there? Do you think that this is a guy that has that? Because I think it takes a really, really special player at that size to be a difference maker.
Yeah, Little John, great kid, great kid. Love chatting with him. He was at this event last year in Finland. Really, like just a friendly guy. Cousins of Logan Cooley too, and so they
Yes.
train in the summer together. But yeah, if you had asked me this 12 months ago, I would have been like, he's got a shot. Playing up, he played really, really well on that third line with Trevor Connolly last year. They're working the cycle, getting pucks to the net. And it's like, if he can keep taking steps. Now, unfortunately, didn't really take any steps this year. Actually had like a really, really difficult first half of the season. And I think that is going to be a lasting image on a lot of teams. It's like, oh, he's 5'6", 5'7", and then he had a really tough time up until kind of the new year. Things have come together a little bit more now in the spring, and he's looking better, and he looked fine. He wouldn't have been my player of the game last night. I know he grabbed a couple apples there, but Fiddler or Potter were clearly the two best players for the Americans last night. But he's a great kid, so I'm hoping he gets a flyer, or I'm hoping that he goes to school and he ends up being a college free agent or something like that, coming out after a couple of years. He's not Sean Doogie. He's not that small, so the sweater doesn't hang around his ankles when he's skating out there. But so I think there's a chance still, but he's not Cliff Ronning, right? Like that kind of guy who can really make things. Nathan Gerby was the last one, I think, at his size to actually get in there. And like, how hard was it for Gerby to get in and stay in and bounce out and bounce in? And like he had a lot of physical abilities to get inside position and hold it and fight. He kind of had a fire hydrant body shape a little bit more than a kid like LJ does. But so I'm rooting for him. I am rooting for him, but it's going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do think he's going to get drafted. I think that there's going to be a team out there that likes him enough that will use one of those really late round picks on him. And just to see. And maybe they don't sign him. But you give him he's a guy that I think, like you said, maybe you don't draft him and in a couple of years you're chasing him as a college free agent. And maybe he, like if nothing else, maybe he's, a guy that's going to be a long time AHL player, like a TJ Tynan or something like that, and those players have value. They do. I mean, within an organization, they're not NHL value, but that's a different thing. So I'm fascinated by the player, but some of those guys you mentioned, they also had better resumes, right? They had more, proven track record. You think about guys like Rocco Grimaldi, who was a second round pick, but most of those guys will play under 500 games in the NHL. And when you're drafting players and you say, based on history, this is the max we can get, there are going to be teams that say that's not worth the investment of draft capital. So, I think that size, you can get hung up on size, but there are times where size just is what it is. And that's, I think in this case, kind of where we're at. So love the player though. But it was interesting. After he got player of the game, I had heard a number of questions from people like, where's he going to go in the draft? Why was he so low on Central? I was like, well, that's why. I want to close out the USA talk with Cullen Potter because he scored a goal that didn't count. But when you look at his skating ability, it is a clear separator. He's not big either, but when you skate at an elite level, as he does, the question I have is he going to be a first rounder? I think in a class like this, it's going to be, you really don't know where things are going to go in the latter half of the first round. Is he the kind of guy you use a first round pick on? And ultimately, as we see him now at this level, if he was at the U18 level all year and was putting up big numbers and other things like that, how would we view his draft stock? Because I feel like he would have been a dominant player. I respect the decision. I was critical of it before because I didn't think he was ready for it. I thought that he proved that he was, throughout the year, he could handle the college hockey grind, and maybe there's still more to go as he gets stronger. But Cam, I mean, is this a guy that we should be talking more about as a first rounder?
I think so. He was on my first round list, ahead of our meetings with EP there a couple weekends ago. The speed, it's separating, like you said, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
distinguishing, standout skill that few players in this class own. Like he is a true 7th-grade skater, I think. He skates a little bit like Nate Mack. He's got that wide base, so it's not like he doesn't recover all the way under his body when he's accelerating. It's really that boom, 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 but he explodes. It explodes, and that wide base gives him more stability and strength. I think somewhere in that 20 to 25 range, 26, 27, who knows, right? But is where he should be. And I was having this debate with some of our other scouts in Slack just last night. Point to me a different forward on that USA team here that should be a first rounder in front of him. And I don't see it. I don't see it in Will Moore. I don't see it in Murtagh. They're fine, but I think they're day 2 players. And if Potter went 34th overall, oh well, I think that's just a good pick for somebody. But I think he's a day 1 player in this draft class.
Yeah, I've been on the fence about it throughout the year, just because I felt like there's little things where he can try to do a little too much. He can, kind of make some bad decisions with the puck at times. But really, I find myself nitpicking the player because he's got this just elite tool of skating. And there are so few players in this draft that even have that one thing that is top tier. And this is one of those. And you mentioned the skating stride. He's got this wide base. I think for that wide base, he actually has more smoothness connected to that. His edge work, his multi-directional skating is unbelievable. And those are the things that can really put a player on the path towards being something at the NHL level. I'm fascinated to see kind of how everything plays out with him. But Cullen Potter was a guy that, both of us obviously saw very closely and like, wow, I mean, I would agree with you. I don't think that there's a player within the NTDP at this point, the current guys. I do like, Cole McKinney. I do like Jack Murtagh. But, I think Potter has shown, there's that trait that I think NHL teams will gravitate towards, even though he's not the biggest guy. Czechia also very nearly pulls the upset, but one of the highlights of the game for them was 6'6" defenseman Radim Mrtka scoring very early in the second period. Just an absolute, kind of got Blake Fiddler turned inside out a little bit. I think it was probably a tough read from Blake that opened the door, but then the quick release, the shot placement. When you see a 6'6" defenseman make plays like that, it does open your eyes. I mean, Radim Mrtka, there's a lot to like there. Do you like Radim Mrtka?
Oh gosh. I've really kind of run the whole gamut with this kid. At the Hlinka, people were kind of drooling over him, the size, and I'm just like, I don't know. I'm like, yeah, there's like a potential for defensive stopping power moving forward with his length, but he's kind of, I don't like his skating mechanics so much. Again, he's 6'6", so it is difficult to be a really fluid skater at that size. But then he came to Seattle and playing for the T-Birds there and playing like 30 minutes a night. He was everything for them, and he looked good, and he kind of won me over a little bit on some more of that potential. And he was good last night too. The goal was nice, but I do like he's really hit or miss with his outlets. I still don't like the skating mechanics, but he's a 6'6" defenseman who does have really high end stopping power and can flash something like he did last night at this level anyway. So, he won't be the second defenseman on my board, but he might be on a few NHL team lists because, he does have the distinguishing factor of being very, very big.
Yeah, he is big, but he's not that physical. Like that is one of the issues is that he can be, but like, I'm pretty sure LJ Mooney took him out last night.
Yeah.
so
it's not ideal.
Is that no? But yeah. what I think the thing for me with Mrtka is, and I think this is one of those things where you have to talk about where do you start taking the swings. I think there's upside there. I think the ideas are there. I think that the hockey sense is coming along. I don't mind his skating. I'm all right with it. I think that at his size, I think that he does enough. He's got that length and he's got, the ability to kind of cover the ground. I think he
Mm-hmm.
has decent enough footwork in tight spaces. The where I think I do struggle is, is that compete consistent? Is he urgent enough at times? Those are some of the things where I do get a little bit concerned. But when I see that frame and I see the hands, I see that he can make plays and not, he doesn't make a ton like the one we saw last night, but he makes good enough plays. That's a guy where I say, okay, there's a lot there. And in a class where we're a little bit lighter on defensemen, I might want to take a swing. And we know that defensemen and centers go early in drafts. Is he going to be a top 10 guy? Is he going to be I think he's a no doubt top 15 based on what I think NHL teams are going to do. I don't know if he'll be top 15 on my list yet. But I do think that that's a guy where there's tools and there's something to be there for him. But any closing thoughts on the big man, Radim Murdka?
No, I think we nailed him.
I agree. By the way, Adam Bennock is back. He will be with the
He
Czechs.
is.
Youngstown got eliminated from the playoffs. He's been registered, so he is expected to be in the lineup with Czechia. He was not in the lineup for Team USA. And with the addition of him, I think that they're going to struggle still to score, even though I think he'll help them in that regard. Does Czechia have a legitimate medal hope here? Is this a team that could sneak in? Also, their goaltender last night until the third period was really sharp.
And then he wasn't.
And then he wasn't.
Yeah. That 2-2 goal was a no bueno. Yeah, it was a gift for Fiddler there. Banach, that's going to be shot in the arm because he is going to be their best offensive player. And, whether or not I loved him in the USHL this year, this kid shines internationally, right? He just rips up the Holinka, the last couple years. So I expect he's going to come here and put up some points and be their focal point offensively. And that's going to be big for them too. So shame he wasn't here for last night's game because that could have been the difference.
It could have.
On pure offensive skill alone, like in that game, he might have been it, right? He might have been the best guy on the ice potentially. Him or Potter. But so I'm looking forward to seeing him again. Unfortunately, the same thing, right? You asked me back in August, I've been like, yeah, this kid's going to go in the top 2 rounds. And I know he put up some points in the USHL this year, but at his size, 5'7", doesn't score in translatable ways, I don't think, into the pro level. So another one who probably he's going to be a pick, but really a mountain to climb at his size to actually play, 200 NHL games.
Yeah, and I think, I agree with you. I think that we're going to see him go much lower than he was projected at the beginning of the year. He is a guy that has, tremendous hockey sense, but really, you're right. I think that there's, it's going to be tough. And I think he needed to rip up the USHL to really change minds. Yeah. And he was good, not great. And so that's going to be a factor in that. But I do think, I think the Czechs, if they get the goaltending, if the goaltending holds up for them, they're going to be a threat. They've got some size. They've got some guys that'll play with a little bit of jam. They were pretty involved. I think if they could have stayed out of the box a little bit more, they would have had, some more success, even though USA's power play didn't really hurt them that badly. I just think that Czechia never really got into the offensive rhythm of that game. So I'll be interested to see them going forward. All right, we've waited this long. We're going to go to the team that hasn't played a game yet as we record this, but we'll be playing right after we record this, and we'll both be there in Allen, Texas to watch it. And that's Canada. Canada has finalized its roster. They had a number of high-profile NHL draft picks already, guys that are prospects that will be picked next year. They have a very young roster. There's a lot of guys that aren't eligible until 2026. They could have gotten younger with Landon DuPont, but he was not among the 25 players named to the roster for Frisco and Allen. However, Canada has not registered everybody, so hold that thought. We're going to talk about that too. No Jake O'Brien, who was eliminated. The Bulldogs were eliminated from the playoffs. Yep. He's not here, and that would have been a guy that I think a lot of people wanted to see at this event. However, Cole Reshny is here, and he's on his way. from the Victoria Royals, and a guy whose stock is rising. And I want to start with Reshny first, and we're going to go throughout the whole thing. But I know you mentioned this the other day. His stock is rising with how he performed in the playoffs. I mean, Victoria, I think, put up a much bigger fight than people expected them to, and he was a major part of that. I think he has a chance to be a real difference maker for this Team Canada, right?
Oh yeah, right. Like he's a frontline player for this team. Um, Very few players are as hot as he has been since like the turn of the calendar over to 2025. So I think he's been putting up just over 2 points a game in like the 35 games since Jan 1. Um, a really like sublime playmaker, play creator. Does have some finishing ability to his game too, but like that slight, slippery, slick alliteration out the Yahoo here. But he's a fun player. It was tough because with that Spokane Victoria series, I watched the Royals because they're the closest dub team to where I live, and they've never had a player like him. And now they got him, and they got Keaton Verhoff, who's also coming on the blue line. And so I was really rooting for them, but I knew that if they got knocked out, that we would get those two players over here. But if Spokane lost, we would have got Mathis Preston, who's a really exciting 2026 kid too. But no, I'm looking forward to seeing Reshny and looking for him to. He has built up his stock, and I've checked with some teams, and they're noticing too. Obviously, the 25 points in 10 games in the playoffs or whatever he did, very very impressive. And now it's one more opportunity against your cohort and younger, not U20, to really light it up again. So if he can come here, jump in, both feet and put up a bunch of points, that's going to look really, really well to solidify him as, number one, a first round pick. Number two, like how high could he go? Could he go in the mid-teens? I think that's up for grabs at this point. There is, again, some questions about translatability because he's not the biggest or the fastest player, but offensive skill and IQ are through the roof.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think there's a lot to really like about the player, and I think that's going to be, on display here. On top of that, you mentioned Keaton Verhoff. No Landon DuPont, but I think there's got to be a lot of excitement about Verhoff. Ryan Lynn was added to the team. They've got younger defensemen that have done some really impressive things this year. On top of that, so let's talk a little bit about Verhoff as well. I mean, record-setting year for pretty incredible year for him overall. Talk a little bit more about him because I know you've had eyes on him a lot more than I have.
Yeah, big right shot defenseman, skates well, shoots like a cannon. Put up, I think, 21 this year, which is the most by a U17 defenseman in the last 40 years and the third most ever in the West. So when you say historic, damn near, right? Like record setting anyways. So he's a very exciting player. Another one who's projected next year in 26 to be a very, very high pick. Really excited to get some eyes on him at this level too. Seems like a really good kid too, from a good family as well. So we'll get eyes on him here. We'll get, he'll be at the Holinka next year as well, and that'll kind of be the kickoff. This is really going to be the formation of his build up to being a top pick next year. And you mentioned Ryan Lynn as well, who was added, who was registered. He was with the team over here in Texas, skating with them, but wasn't on the registration. They registered him this morning. One of the only players that they actually added to the roster that they did register, and I believe that was once Landon DuPont kind of told them he was banged up in round one with Everett and came back and played through it. And then they lost that game 7 there, that he wasn't going to come. They're like, okay, Lynn's our guy. And he put up 50 points for the Giants this year on the blue line as a 16-year-old as well. So they've got a ton of really exciting young defensemen on this blue line too, to go along with a kid like Jackson Smith, who's a stud in my mind too, who could be a top 10 pick this year. So Canada's blue line. And then they even got Daxon Rudolph too, who they haven't registered, but they have invited over, which is a good indication that he will get registered and he will see some playing time. Another really, really exciting top pick for 2026 on that blue line. So yes, a young blue line, but a really exciting one.
Yeah, and also Xavier Villeneuve, who's a point per game player in the queue this year, and isn't draft eligible until next season as well. So, he's missed the draft cutoff by a couple of weeks for this year, but still a point per game defenseman for Blainville Boisbriand. So that's wow. my French is going to need a little bit of brushing up there on that one. But either way, yeah, I'm excited to see it. I know you're believing this is a team that can be the favorite here. That you look at, when you're at an under 18 or an under 20 or anything like that, you kind of look at the average age. And so Sweden and USA, it's like average of 17 and a half. And then you look at what Canada has, and it's 17.2. 17. So that's kind of a little bit younger, but not so much so that they're completely neophytes here. They're all ready to go. So what? And we didn't talk about him, but Jack Ivankovic is their goalie. So a guy who played at the World Under 20, the World Junior, is their goaltender. We talked a bit about the guys that were named previously or were going to be named, but what ultimately do you think? Why do you think that this team is the top seed here?
Yeah, so they don't have like the superstar player like they had last year with McKenna, and Porter Martone was excellent for them last year, and they had TJ Ginla. So they had these big name guys. They didn't get Michael Misa. They wanted, he was still kind of recovering from a minor injury they had in the playoffs there. So he just couldn't quite get it done to get here. But I still think they have a ton of juice. Like Brady Martin, very, very good player. Braden Coots, I think, is going to open some eyes at this tournament too. Is a very talented player, great speed, great skill. Again, playing for that T-Birds team there in Seattle, not a lot to work with there this year, and managed to really shine still despite that in a difficult spot. So I like some of their guys up front that they still do have that are going to be impact players from they got Jack Nesbitt's going to come in as well. 6'3", 6'4" power center. Who's he's put himself on the map to be a top 15 pick. Ryan Rubrick next year, that guy could be pushing number 2, another big power center too. So they have a lot of these guys that I think that could step up and have a big tournament despite not being necessarily superstars. And then I mentioned all those defensemen, and then you throw Ivan Kovic. All that kid does is win when he's wearing a Team Canada jersey, right? He's got a U18 gold. He's got a Holinka. He's got the WJC. Like he didn't win that one, but he has experience at all levels. He wins big games. So I do think that they're really well positioned in goal too. And this is their title to lose. I think is the defending champs that they're coming back. I know a lot of people are giving it to Sweden, but I'm sticking with the roots here, and the passport's in my back pocket that Canada's the front runner.
Yeah, wow. Well, good thing you don't have to be deported like you almost were after the after the World Juniors. However, we are in Texas, so careful what you say, my friend. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens here. But yeah, Texas, what a great host it's been. Unfortunately, the weather not as great today, but beautiful days down here and a great setting for the tournament. The U.S. is likely going to host the under 18s on a rotating basis, possibly every other year. This is the second time it has been in Frisco. Allen is now the secondary site. It was previously in Plano, I believe, last time. So it's just a great event. And if you have ever been curious about the future of the game, I've covered that. This is my 10th tournament that I've covered live since 2009. The first 2 I was working for USA Hockey, and then I was broadcasting for USA Hockey for a bit, and then more doing this. The amount of players that I've gotten to see before they became world famous hockey players at this event is really something. And so if you guys want to be like, I saw them when, this is a great way to do it. It's on NHL Network in the United States, TSN in Canada. I believe USA Hockey TV is streaming. I believe that they also have IIHF TV streaming and TSN Plus streaming. So there are multiple ways to watch it, no matter where in the world you are. So make sure you do that. But we are going to wrap a bow on our under 18 segment. We're going to talk a little bit about a couple of other things. One thing I just want to quickly mention, now is the time to get your FloHockey subscription because the Calder Cup playoffs are underway, and I cannot stress to you how good the prospect pool is this year. Axel Sandin Pellikka, Michael Branson-Nygård, Nate Danielson, that's on one team. Artem Levshinov, Kevin Korchinski. You look Denton Mateychuk with Cleveland. You look at what Lehigh Valley has now with Jet Luchenko, with Alex Bump, fresh off of a national championship. The number of high-end NHL prospects that are playing. Just look at the Rochester Americans: Consta Helenius, Noah Ostlund, Isaac Rosen, Devin Levi, got Yaroslav Askarov. I'm naming players that are among the very best young players in the world, guys that are on the cusp of the NHL. If you want to have a preview for next season, I highly recommend get yourself a monthly subscription to FloHockey.tv. Watch these games because there is so much to see. And if you have never watched the AHL, the quality of hockey relative, it's not the NHL, but it is the second. To me, it's the second best league in the world. I know that a lot of people will say the KHL. Honestly, with the amount of young talent that is developing and playing in the AHL right now, that to me is you can't get much better than that. And this is a great time to get a preview of those players. I think a lot of the AHL teams do such a tremendous job at their broadcast. Elite broadcasters, elite players, and hopefully an elite experience for you watching on FloHockey.tv. All right, that's my sales pitch. That's my sales pitch here. But we're going to go to one big topic that we very briefly touched on last time, and the fire has grown. Cam, let's talk Tom Wielander real quick. He did not sign with Vancouver. There's been a lot of chatter about what's happening. What's happening?
Yeah, just a little quick. We'll just give another quick update here. So the Canucks brass had their year-end meetings there, and Patrick Alvin, the GM, basically said, last we were told by his reps is he was planning on going back to school next year, and that they were kind of a little confused that he would turn down a contract offer from them. But I was quick to point out on Twitter and drew the ire of that executive branch there too. Shirley was that his intention is to come out of school, and I think that was very clear. Is that he feels he's ready to turn pro and he's looking to come out, but at the same time, there is an expectation for your value in comparison to similarly skilled players and similarly drafted, slotted players. So a kid like Z Bouillon, who went 12th overall in 2024, just came out. Max bonuses on his Schedule A, which is only $1 million total, right? For the Schedule A bonuses, a maximum of $1 million. And he burned a year off his ELC. Well, Wielander, he wasn't even asking to burn a year, but he's looking to get, a comparable bonus package. And these bonuses are 10 goals, 40 points, make the all-star team, make the all-rookie team, those types of things. Things that are unlikely that the defenseman is even going to achieve. But the Canucks have this internal structure in place that they don't give out Schedule A bonuses to that level. And they did the same thing with Jonathan Lekirimaki. But at the same time, they put an 11th overall pick on this kid, on a right shot defenseman who has played very, very well. We heard his defensive partner, you were speaking to him, Sasha Boumediene there, just rave about what an excellent skater he is, how he has the best stick in college hockey defensively, how he's a beast, and how he doesn't think he's going back to school next year. And, I think that there's a possibility that he does go back to school if the Canucks don't change their tune and offer him what he's deserved. But we see he's skating on the top pair for Sweden's national team right now in an exhibition game against Finland this morning. So he has he left school. He didn't, he hasn't left school, but he left the season early, the semester early, to go play with the national team now and hopefully play at the World Championships, because he's looking for an opportunity to continue playing, because he should be in the AHL right now, playing with the Abbotsford Canucks in their playoff run, and he's not. And so the Canucks are risking, ostracizing, isolating this player that they put so much draft capital into, and that would be so important to their right side defense long term. And so now the question has to be, is he a trade chip? They clearly need to go get a second line center. Do we see him get moved potentially with their first round pick this year for like a true number 2 center? And I think that the way they're handling him might be reflective of that desire, that they're not willing to sign him right now to give him that bonus package in case they do end up keeping him. And they're like, well, if we don't sign him, then we can just trade his rights anyways.
Yeah, I mean, we're in this era where there's greater player choice, right? There's greater player preferences, and they are now, that's what they are trying to exercise, is the rights that they have. And that's, to me, is really what, they should do. I mean, basically the entry-level system is not set up to benefit, their max earning potential, of course. But if there is a cap, and you have a certain level of value, you should be getting to that. So I do think the Canucks are playing with a little bit of fire here. There's obviously been barbs,
Mm-hmm.
thrown out publicly and whatever else. You mentioned Sasha Boumediene says, I don't think he's coming back. So, but what does that mean? Does that mean that there is a happy ending to be had here with Vancouver, or does that mean something else entirely? I mean, it's not like he doesn't have an option to also go back home and play in Sweden. So there's all these other things that could potentially come to true fruition here. But obviously, it's something that needs to be resolved. Really quickly, wanted to touch on these next couple of weeks in the NHL, CHL, or any NCAA and CHL recruiting battle will heat up. Player seasons are
Oh, yeah.
ending. A lot of the players, overagers have committed. Henry Muse was the first kind of guy that was still like an established OHL, star player with junior eligibility that did commit to the University of Michigan. I do not think he will be the last. I don't know how many will come over, but there are a ton of college coaches here at the under 18 Worlds. I think they're more aggressively scouting and offering kids from Europe. They're more aggressively scouting and offering kids from the CHL and guys that are not going to be overagers. So they are aggressively approaching these players. The couple things I did hear from college coaches, hey, it's hard for us to have them on official visits right now because the campus is in finals mode and they're wrapping up the season. There's not a lot of time left to showcase what the college experience is because the school year ends and the town kind of disperses. So there's those things as well. There's also been a lot of conversation about NIL, and I think there is a very significant knowledge gap on that based on what I'm hearing. The amount of money that's available, not as much. If you're Gavin McKenna, I'm sure they will find whatever money you need to come play. If you're not, they have a pretty significant cap because these NIL collectives, all that money, it's going to football and basketball. There's enough left for other sports but there is a cap to that spending. I've talked to at least one Big Ten school that said their budget is under $1 million. It's, upper six figures, but, so that's the other thing is there's kinds of those conversations. But Cam, I mean, this is when the nerves are starting to set in for a lot of CHL general managers as NCAA schools are coming with their offers.
Yeah, no, this is going to be where, and we've been saying it all year, right? Is that they had to wait until the season's end. No one's going to go out and check out, BC or BU or Michigan in the middle of their season when they're playing for Medicine Hat or something, right? So it's, and speaking of Medicine Hat, they're still playing, right? They're in the conference finals now too. So, we will have to wait on Gavin McKenna. We'll have to wait on Ryder Ritchie we'll have to wait on Caden Lindstrom. So there's going to be some big names that are still out there over the next week or two. But I like you, I've been hearing the same things, that things are ramping up. Speaking to some agents and some teams, is that yes, before it was just kind of like feelers, like, hey, maybe this could be something, maybe this could be something. Some of the other players are a little more aggressive with like what they could potentially be offering as a framework for that NIL money, without being like, here's what we're going to give you for that NIL money. But I do think that we're going to start to see some hard figures getting put across, and here's who you would potentially be playing with. Here's your opportunity. Here's what we can give you. Want to commit, and we're going to start to see that soon. So hopefully you and I can be right at the forefront of that too, and break some of these ones. Hopefully some big names. Sorry to the CHL, but good for business for us to see some big names move.
Yeah. I mean, player movement is certainly just as it is at the NHL level. I think this is going to be a fascinating time, and like I said, there are going to be moments that are ugly. There are going to be moments that are, it's going to happen. There's just, you kind of have to get ready to adapt to this new world, and that's there. But I do want to get to we're running short on time because both you and I got a hockey game to get to. We got to go see this Canada team in action in Allen, Texas. So I want to move to our Beyond Belief segment, and we've got a couple here for you we can touch on quickly. This is, of course, where one of us will read a statement to the other, and the other decides if it is beyond belief, believable, or maybe there needs to be a little more conversation about it. But we're going to start this thing off talking a little bit about some of these U18 players. And my question to you, you kind of answered this earlier, but I may have a different answer. Radim Murtka will be the second defenseman off the board after Matthew Schaefer. Not do you think he should be, but will be?
That's the difference there, is that he wouldn't be my number two defenseman, but I do. It's funny because I'm pulling quotes right now for the draft guide. So I'm hitting up a bunch of scouts and execs and all this stuff to get these quotes. And there are, I like Jackson Smith a lot. And there are some teams that don't think as highly of Jackson Smith and that they do like Redimer. I'm going to say that's a true statement. I'm going to say that he will be the second defenseman off the board this June.
All right. All right. So yeah, so I think you will be as well. So we do have the same answer in the end, but I think I do think Smith, and I also think Aitchison has a chance.
Ooh.
I think he has. I think there are teams out there that love Keyshawn Aitchison. And
I there are.
Remember, Erica Branson went third overall one year. And we've got
different
a defenseman
times
that has way more offense on top of having that snarl. I wouldn't be stunned if a team, and would it be mine? No. I actually happen to think Reddy Merck is my number two defenseman. However, I'm fascinated. So I think that I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but that's one of those sneaky ones where if the lottery balls bounce the right way, you might see a team jump up and go after Aitchison. But I turn it back over to you.
I love Keyshawn. You know that too. The teams
that.
I'm talking to aren't as sweet. I think he might be there in the mid-teens. I think he could be there 16, 17. But I hope he's not. I hope he goes earlier. I'm with you.
I feel like there's some sandbagging going on with him. So we'll see.
There could be. Yeah. Okay, this one's for you. Cullen Potter is the best skater in the draft. Number one. And there's some good skaters.
There are. This is a no-brainer for me that he is number one. However, I think it's not just number one in this draft. I think we're looking at one of the best skaters in the last couple of classes. I think that there is a different. Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think back to some of these more recent drafts, and there are certainly guys that can move. I think in terms of explosiveness, maybe you have Oliver Moore. But to me, there's a difference between the way that Cullen Potter moves with speed than a lot of these guys. So I think it's not in the totality. Not only is he the fastest, I think that he might be one of the best pure skaters that I've seen in the last little bit here. Just in terms of the explosiveness, the fluidity, the multi-directional skating, there's a lot to like about the player. I do think that, there aren't a ton of guys. Maybe you can refresh my memory of a guy that you feel you would put up there in maybe the last 2 to 3 drafts. I mean, Jet Luchenko is certainly a very fast skater, but I think I would love to see some of these guys race, honestly, just because I think what we've seen from Potter is pretty special.
Yeah, I mean, even this year too, Cameron Schmidt's a really strong skater. Mies is a strong skater. Last year, Bouillon, an excellent skater too, right? I mean, Celebrini, great skater. So there's been some ones I'm trying to think of the year before that who would be like kind of the top flight mover in that class too. But yes, he is an exceptional mover, and I would say the top skater in this class as well, Cullen Potter.
All right. Well, now it's my turn. Yeah, now it's my turn.
Yeah.
One of Ivar Stenberg or Viggo Bjork, the top young players for Sweden, will challenge Gavin McKenna for first overall in 2026. This isn't, too definitive. It's not will they. It's,
could they?
Could they challenge him? Is there a possibility? It's not they will. It's could they?
I will say that is beyond belief that they will not challenge Gavin McKenna. There is one player I think who could potentially get in the mix, and it's Ryan Rubrick, and I don't actually think he will do it either. No, I think this is Gavin, and then it's everybody else.
I think this is one of those situations where the hype is going to, regardless of what happens, the team is just not going to have. I don't think that Gavin will fall down, but I don't think the team would have the fortitude to tell their fan base we're not taking Gavin McKenna.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, Cam, that I will say, it is not outside of the realm of possibility that these two guys are going to put themselves in that top 3 conversation, that they could be in that top 2 conversation. They are very, very good players, and I think a lot of teams will be keeping a close eye on them. All right, you go, my friend.
Okay, last one. This one's for you. You know what my answer is. Canada defends their title here at the U18s. What do you think, Chris?
I think it's beyond belief. I think that I
Woo!
think that there's a couple of factors. I think Sweden's continuity. They've had a lot of these guys together many times this year. They have depth. They have, I think the goaltending is good enough. I think that they have guys that can push back against physical play. I think there are guys that will push physically as well. So to me, I like Sweden as my favorite for this tournament. I also think that US team with some of that similar kind of thing, they're not as there's not as much continuity as there usually is for them. And that first game kind of showed that, I felt like. But I look at guys like, Charlie Trethewey, Cole McKinney, guys that have been in this program. I think they could challenge Canada. Now, do I think Canada is better on paper than the U.S. team? Absolutely, I do. But I do think the youth factor is going to be at least a tiny bit of it. But I really, I think this speaks more to how much I like Sweden versus what I think of Canada. And obviously, we haven't even seen Canada play. We have seen Sweden. So it's a disadvantage an information disadvantage for me. But either way, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I
All
mean,
right.
all that continuity really helped the Americans last year against the Canadians too, right? Those Canadian boys with those gold medals
Fair
around their
point.
neck. I was in the airport in
Hey,
Helsinki holding the World Championship trophy with them at about 4 a.m. the next morning, bleary eyed. That was a great time for me. So let's do that again.
well, yeah, but yeah, the continuity didn't help, but remember, it was an outside player that took the penalty that's for the time of the game.
Hey now, hey now,
So,
hey now. Yeah.
yeah, sorry,
That's a
sorry.
professional hockey player
Anyway,
you're talking about now.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I signed under contract. Yep. All right. So we're gonna stick with this theme because I think let's talk about it because okay, maybe they don't challenge Gavin McKenna, but in our you have to pick one segment, we are going with these two Swedish players next year draft. Let's say the draft is held this, I don't want to put that qualifier on it, but like just in general, you got to pick one: Vigo Bjork versus Ivar Stenberg. Who is your number one between those two players?
God, this one is tougher than I thought it would be because every time I've seen them live, Ivar's been the better player. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
drawn to Vigo Bjork. I'm drawn to his skills. They intrigue me, and also because he's so young, and I think that really like what's going to happen when he puts on 20 pounds of muscle, right? I'm going to stick with Vigo. I'm going to stick with the young kid, and it might bite me because I think the safer pick is Ivar Stenberg at this point because he is more developed. He has played pro hockey. He is closer to NHL ready. But I'm going to go with the young kid and take a swing because you got to risk it to get the biscuit sometimes.
Can't I don't fault you for it. I don't fault you for it, but I'm going the other way. I think
I
Stenberg.
appreciate that.
I'll play it safe. It's fine. I'll play
Yep.
it safe. I'll play it safe. It's no
Yeah.
big deal. But Ivar Stenberg, and I did watch him in the um, I did watch him in the SHL playoffs this year, and what I saw was a
Mm,
player that has maturity beyond his years. You talked about the hard skill that he has. You talked about there is not a lick of fear in that kid. There is tremendous confidence. He makes plays. He's confident on the puck. He just does a lot of those things well. Additionally, while of course Vigo did set the record this year in terms of the you know the total production. Stenberg did pretty darn well in the U20 as well, averaging
Point per
nearly
game.
2 points per game in 27 games. So he was
Yeah.
averaging nearly 2 points per game. And yes, he's older, maybe, but he is a little bit bigger. I think he will be a little bit stronger. I think he will be ultimately the better of the two players. And I do think that he is going to be a top five, as much as a top five pick next season. However, I do think Vigo is a legit player. He is going to challenge, but I have to go not just because it's better for the audience if we don't agree. It is
Yeah.
my true opinion that if you were to ask me which of those two guys I would rather have, I would definitely say Ivar Stenberg is that guy. So, I mean, hey, either way, if you're Sweden, guess what? You get to have both of them. For now,
Yeah.
for the under 20s, for a while going forward, good news is on the horizon for Team Sweden with those two guys in the mix.
Agreed. Good times.
All right, folks. Well, we got to get out of here because we got to go watch some hockey. We got to tell you more about this. We'll be back next week. We'll give you a much more in depth look at the Under 18 World Championship and how it is going to impact the NHL draft. We are going to talk a lot more about what we got cooking for the NHL draft as well. but plenty more to come. Want to thank our sponsors, Wonderful Pistachios, for their support of Called Up the Prospects podcast. Want to thank you, the listeners, and remind you, please leave a kind rating and review on your podcast app of choice. You can also follow this podcast on FloHockey.tv or on our YouTube page at FloHockey. So make sure you are checking that out. Check out everything Cam's got going on over at Elite Prospects. I throw it to him to let you know what's coming up, but hey, we got to go. But Cam, make sure you're checking everything out over at Elite Prospects. Make sure you are getting that app downloaded and watching along as we go. And don't forget to subscribe to FloHockey as well if you want to check out the Calder Cup playoffs, the Clark Cup playoffs, the Kelly Cup playoffs. Every kind of cup you can imagine is up for grabs right now on FloHockey. So that is going to do it for this week's episode of Called Up the Prospects podcast. Huge thanks to Ever for producing, my co-host Cam for bringing the heat, and to all of you for listening. Thank you so much. This has been Called Up the Prospects podcast. We will see you next week.